Hello everyone, welcome to CBRC University Biology Module number 9 entitled Human Anatomy and Physiology. For the overview of our module, we're going to deal with all the 10 body systems including the integumentary system or the external systems of our body, the framework of our body also called as the skeletal system, the system of our body which is responsible for the movement, which is the muscular system, the, the system of the body responsible for nutrient ingestion, the digestive system, circulatory system, respiratory system, the nervous system, excretory system, the system which is responsible for hormone secretion, the endocrine system, and lastly, the the system responsible for the perpetuation of human life, we have the reproductive system. So the first question is how does man performs life functions? Uh, Man performs our life functions with the help or with the coordination of our body systems. And today we're going to deal with the two important branches of science. The first one is the anatomy. When we say anatomy, that is the branch of science that deals with the structure of the living things. While physiology is the branch of science that deals with the function of that specific organ. So today, we're going to deal with the organ and the function of each organ. So for the human body systems, we're going to deal with integumentary system, skeletal system, muscular system, digestive system, circulatory system, respiratory system, nervous system, excretory system, endocrine system, and lastly, the reproductive system. So to start, we're going to begin with the external and the most important system for protection and covering of our body, and that is the integumentary system. For the components of the integumentary system, we have the skin, our hair, nails, subcutaneous tissue, and lastly are the assorted glands. So what are the functions of integumentary system? Number one, it protects the body's internal living tissues and organs. So that is very obvious because that is the function of the skin. Next, it lubricates and waterproofs our body. So later we will discuss how skin or how the epidermal layer of the skin lubricates our body. Next, it protects against invasion by infectious microorganisms, protects the body from dehydration. And lastly, sense receptors for touch, pressure, pain, heat, and cold. So those are the main functions of integumentary system. So let's start with the first component. Let's start with the skin. So the main function of the skin, it plays an important role in protecting against pathogens. When we say pathogens, those are the disease-causing microorganisms. So our first line of defense is the skin. It is because the skin provides this outer covering on our body as it is covered by what we call keratin and the waxy substances secreted by the sweat glands. Next is that skin has pigmentation called as melanin, provided and secreted by these melanocytes, which absorbs some of the potentially dangerous radiation in sunlight. That's why the brownish skin color was resulted from the concentration of melanin pigments. And these melanin pigments are responsible for the absorption of UV light. And these melanin pigments are secreted by the melanocytes. So the main function of the skin, again, is to protect our body against pathogens and to provide protection against sunlight. So we're going to proceed now with the layers of the skin. So the skin has two major layers. So the first layer is the epidermis. So epidermis is the outer layer and it provides waterproofing and serves as barrier for infection or against infection. So epidermis provides waterproofing. It is because our sweat glands releases waxy substances, and keratin, which is present in our skin, is a kind of protein which is a hydrophobic or water-fearing. Next is the dermis. So dermis serves as a location for the appendages of the skin. And the last part is the hypodermis or the adipose layer. So adipose layer is the layer of the skin which is attached to the bone, and it is where the blood vessels and other nerves are attached. So again, the main layers of the skin are the epidermis, dermis, and the adipose layer, also known as the hypodermis. Next important component of the integumentary system is our hair. So hair on our scalp provides insulation from cold for the head. So the hair of eyelashes and eyebrows keeps dust and perspiration out of the eyes, and the hair in our nostrils helps keep dust in our nasal cavities. So the hair in our head provides insulation since hair are made up of dead cells. They can absorb or they can provide thermoregulation or the thermoregulation in regulating the temperature in our body. Next is the eyelashes and eyebrows. They provide the protection for our eyes against dust and perspiration. And lastly, the hair in our nostrils, also called as the cilia, which is responsible in filtering out dust and harmful microorganisms. Next is the nails. So, nails are horn-like envelope covering the dorsal aspect of terminal phalanges in the fingers. So, fingernails and toenails are made up of top protein called as keratin. So, keratin are present in animals' hooves, horns, nails, and of course in our hair. So, nails, together with the keratin, is the main reason why that is waterproof or hydrophobic because keratin repels water. So the main function of the skin is to protect the surface of the phalanges or the digits or our fingers, and of course to add adhesion for our hands. So those are the main components of the integumentary system. We have the hair, the nail, and the skin. So now we're going to proceed the framework of our body. The responsible for the fundamental foundation of our body. So and that system is the skeletal system. The skeletal system is divided into two. The axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton is made up of the skull, backbone, and the rib cage, while the appendicular skeleton are made up of the bones of the forelimbs, shoulder girdle, bones of the hind limbs, and the pubic girdle. What are the functions of skeletal system? Number one, it serves as a scaffold which supports organs. It anchors muscle. So together with muscle, its bones allows our body to move. Protect organs such as brain, lungs, and heart. So that is the main function of the skeletal system, to protect vital organs. So the brain was protected by the skull, the lungs was protected by the rib cage, together with the heart. Next, serves as a storage area for minerals such as calcium and phosphorus. The bones, or especially the spongy layer of the bone, serves as the storage for calcium and phosphorus. And also, bone is the site of red blood cell synthesis. And that is provides blood cells. So the human skeleton, it is consists of both fused and individual bones supported and supplemented by ligaments, tendons, and muscles and cartilage. Bodily movement is carried out by the interaction of the muscular and the skeletal system, and muscles are connected by tendons. So when we were young or infant or baby, the number of the bones in our body is 306 or above. But as we grow older, it will now reduce to 206. It is because when we were young, especially our skull, the sutures or the division of our skull are separated. But when we grow older, it was getting compact as the result of the process called ossification. Next, we're going to deal with the parts and specific parts of the bone. Let's start with the periosteum. So periosteum is the membrane that lies at the outer surface of all bones, except of the bone of the long bones. So the main purpose of the periosteum is that it serves as the covering for the bones, since it is a membrane and it covers the outer surface of each osteocyte or the bone building up cells. Next are the compact bone, also known as the hard bone. So compact bone is one of the two types of osseous types that forms in bones. It is harder, stronger, and stiffer than spongy or cancellous bone. And then we have the spongy bone. So the main types of bone are the hard bone and the spongy bone. So the hard bone, it provides the rigid framework for our body, while the spongy bone serves as the site for blood cell synthesis. So spongy bone or cancellous bone is less dense, softer, weaker, and less stiff. It is highly vascular since the Harvesian canal serves as the pathway for the exit of the blood cells and frequently contains red bone marrow where the production of blood cells occur. So those are the main parts of the bone and their functions occurring in the spongy layer. So now we're going to deal with the coordinated muscular system together with the skeletal system. So muscular system, it is consists of three types of muscles. We have the cardiac muscle, the smooth muscle, and the skeletal muscle. So cardiac muscle, it is very obvious that cardiac muscle is within the heart. So cardiac are involuntary and found only in the heart, while smooth muscle are involuntary and make up the internal organ. So especially in the stomach and the small intestine. While skeletal muscle, of course, are the muscle attached to the bone. That's why they are called as skeletal muscle. They are voluntary and moves the bones of the body. So what are the functions of the skeletal system? Number one, it provides movement for the body. That is together with the skeletal system. Next, it allows the heart to beat. It moves the food down to the gastrointestinal tract called the process of peristalsis. So peristalsis is the wave-like movement starting from the esophagus up to the small intestine. It pushes the bolus or the round food to pass through the gastrointestinal tract. So let's start with the cardiac muscle. So cardiac muscle is a type of involuntary striated and multinucleated muscle. When we say multinucleated, it contains three or more nucleus in every cell. Cardiac muscle also differs from other two muscle types in that contraction can occur even without an initial nervous input. It is because cardiac muscle are involuntary muscles, and they contract automatically to squeeze the walls of the heart. They are responsible in pumping out the important blood as well as nutrients throughout the body. Next is the smooth muscles. So smooth muscle is found mainly in the walls of hollow internal organs such as blood vessels, the gastrointestinal tract, the urinary bladder, and the uterus. The amazing fact about smooth muscles is that uh, they are tolerant against acid. It is because the smooth muscle, which covers the inner wall of the stomach, secretes this what we call cuticle enzymes or the cuticle waxes that covers the surface against the acid or the hydrochloric acid secreted by the stomach. Next is that it is capable of automatic, slow, sustained, and rhythmic contraction, such as those needed to push food readily through the gut. So again, a wave-like movement of the muscle is what we call the peristalsis. Next is the skeletal muscle. So skeletal muscle is a type of muscle attached to the bones that is responsible for the skeletal movements. These muscles are conscious or voluntary control. Skeletal muscles have an abundant supply of blood vessels and nerves. This is directly related to the primary function of the skeletal muscle, the contraction. So that is the main function of skeletal muscle. Especially in our arms, the main muscles are the biceps and the triceps. So biceps and triceps are responsible for the contraction and the relaxation of our arm. Actually, there is another muscle in our thigh which is also called as the quadriceps. Quadriceps are muscles which are, unlike triceps and biceps, they are composed of striated three or two lines of muscles, but quadriceps are a kind of muscle which is composed of four rigid and well-developed muscles. So that's why our legs are stronger than our arms. So we're going to deal now with the coordination of muscles and joints. So bones are the take sturdy of the knees, give this joint the strength needed to support and the weight of the body. The rounded shape of the ends of the bones meet at the knee, hollow knee to bend smoothly. So the term used for the area where the two bones meet is called joints. And together with muscles, it allows the bones to work and move together. So we're going to deal now with the important connective tissues present between muscles and bones. So we have this what they call cartilage. So cartilage are flexible rubbery tissue at the ends of the bones, cushions and protects the bones where they meet and rub against each other in the joint. So, the main function of cartilage is to prevent the wear and tear of the bone, since cartilage provides this cushion or protection between the two bones. And of course, muscles provide the tug on the bones and as it pulls and pushes the bones. So ligaments are the long fibrous straps that fastens bones together. So when you're going to connect bones to bones, then you're going to use the ligament. While tendon is used in connecting muscle to bone. So again, ligaments are the connective tissue present in the connection of bone to bone. While tendon are the band of fibrous tissue that connects muscle to bone. So now we're going to deal with the digestive system. So we're now done with the integumentary, skeletal, and the muscular. So we're going to deal now with the system responsible for nutrient absorption of our body. So what are the components of digestive system? We have the gastrointestinal tract and the accessory organ. The gastrointestinal tract are made up of esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and anus. While the accessory organs are made up of liver, gallbladder, and the pancreas. So the functions of digestive system number one, it provides mechanical and chemical digestion of food. So the main difference of mechanical and chemical digestion is that in mechanical, only physical changes are occurring within the food, while in the chemical digestion, there is an enzyme intervention. Next, move the food down the gastrointestinal tract, break down the food into smaller particles, and that can be used by the cell. So that process occurs in the stomach with the help of the hydrochloric acid, which is very acidic. It can digest carbs, fats, and protein. So let's deal with the gastrointestinal tract. So the digestive breakdown. Digestive breakdown is consists of pathway working together that helps the food and the liquids as the building blocks to be burned and turned into smaller particles. So of course, the digestive system starts with the mouth. So the mouth is where the digestive tract begins, and the enzymes released in the mouth that shuts the process of digestion. So the enzymes present in the mouth is the amylase. So amylase is an enzyme responsible in digesting the uh, the carbohydrates. So the digestive system starts in the mouth, and the kind of digestion that occurs in the digestive system are the mechanical and the chemical digestion. Mechanical, it is because our teeth grinds and chew the food. It is chemical because the salivary gland secreted the amylase, which acts against the carbohydrates in the food that we eat. Next is the esophagus. So esophagus is a soft muscular tube that moves food from the pharynx to the stomach. So when you swallow food or liquids, a special flap called epiglottis flaps down the opening of our windpipe to make sure the food enters the esophagus and not the windpipe. So the main function of epiglottis is that it protects or it covers the esophagus together with the trachea. So when we are inhaling, the esophagus will cover the epiglottis will cover the esophagus. But when we are eating, the epiglottis will cover the trachea and it will open the esophagus. Next is the stomach. So stomach is the kidney-shaped organ. So stomach has a lining that's tough enough to hold up the highly acidic environment needed to break down the food. So the process in which food was break down into smaller particles occurs in the stomach. So the stomach is like a mixer churning and mashing together all the small bits or small balls of food that came down from the esophagus and the semi-fluid mass of partly digested food called as the chyme. So the product or the partly digested food which is later be released by the stomach is called as the chyme. Next is the small intestine. So the small intestine also called it is called small because compared to another intestine, it is smaller and it has a smaller length and diameter. It is actually much longer than the large intestine, and it is where the absorption of nutrients occur. Take note of that. that it is in the small intestine where the absorption of nutrients occur. So the small intestine breaks down the food mixture and even more so your body can absorb all the vitamins, mineral, nutrients, carbohydrates, and so on. While the large intestine is consists of three parts, the cecum, the colon, and the rectum. So the main function of the large intestine is that it is the main site of water absorption. Okay, so when the nutrients are already absorbed from the small intestine from the chyme, it will be released to the large intestine, and the main function of large intestine is to absorb the water in the chyme. So when you are suffering or when you have diarrhea, so your feces will be watery or liquefied. So that is due to the malfunctioning of the large intestine. So the large intestine failed to absorb water. So before food mixture goes out, it passes through the part of the large intestine called the colon. So which is where the body gets its last chance to absorb the water and some minerals into the blood. So next is the anus. So anus marks the exit point and the digestive tract where feces leave the body. So the large intestine pushes the poop into the rectum, where the last stop on the digestive tract, solid waste, stays here until you are ready to go to the bathroom. And the liver, so these are the accessory organs. So liver is the body's largest internal organ. Take note of that. That liver is the body's largest internal organ. The liver performs many tasks, including storing energy and helping the body get rid of toxins. And also, the liver is responsible in secreting an important uh, an important substance called bile, which is responsible in fat digestion. So bile is secreted by the liver. So bile is a bitter tasting dark green yellowish brown fluid produced by the liver, and it aids in digestion of lipids in the small intestine. So as the liver produces this substance called bile, it will be stored in the gallbladder. So the gallbladder will store the bile and release it whenever there are fats, lipids, or fatty acids present in the small intestine. So the liver will produce the bile and the gallbladder will release the bile. So gallbladder is a small pouch that stores the bile. The gallbladder releases the bile into the duodenum to help digest fats in the food that we eat. So in humans, the loss of gallbladder is usually easily tolerated. So next, another important accessory organ is the pancreas. So pancreas makes hormones including the insulin to regulate blood glucose level. It also makes enzymes to break down food in the intestine. So the pancreas is also responsible in secreting the glucagon. So the main purpose of the insulin is to regulate blood sugar level or to lower the blood sugar level of our body. While the purpose of glucagon is to increase the blood sugar level of our body. So the function of pancreas is to control or maintain the blood glucose level in our blood. So because the pancreas is the storage depot of digestive systems, injury to pancreas is potentially very dangerous. A puncture of the pancreas generally requires prompt and experienced medical intervention. And also, pancreas is the reservoir of red blood cells, or it is where the red blood cells is being recycled. Now we're going to proceed with the river of life, or the system which is responsible in the distribution of important nutrients throughout the body. And I am referring to the circulatory system. So what are the components of circulatory system? We have the heart, the blood cells, which includes red blood cells, white blood cells, and the platelets. We have the blood vessels, like the arteries, veins, and capillaries, and the fluids like blood and the lymph. So what are the functions of circulatory system? So the functions of circulatory systems are it passes nutrients, gases, hormones, and blood cells and other to and from the cells. So it helps stabilize body temperature and pH level. So let's start with the main organ of the circulatory system. And of course, that is the heart. So our heart is really a muscle. It is located a little to the left of the middle of your chest and it's about a size of our fist. So our heart is sort like a pump or two pumps in one. So the two pumps within our heart is the right pump and the left pump. So the right pump includes the right atrium and the right ventricle, which pumps the blood to the lungs, while the left pump includes the left atrium and the left ventricle, which pumps the blood to the rest of the body. So if you're going to observe the diagram, we can easily notice that the right side of the heart, the right pump, is where the right atrium and the right ventricles works together as they pump the blood to the lungs. So they pump the blood to the lungs to harvest the oxygen in the alveoli and to produce oxygenated blood. And this oxygenated blood will be released again to the heart and will be pumped by the left pump together with the left atrium and the left ventricle and be distributed to the rest of the body. So, the circulation of the body serves to move blood to a site or sites where it can be oxygenated and where waste can be disposed. So, there are two types of circulation, the pulmonary and the systemic. So, for the sake of simplicity, pulmonary circulations occur together with the lungs. Pulmonary because the blood must pick up the nutrients and the oxygen in the alveoli. While systemic circulation is the circulation of the blood which occurs throughout the body. That's why it is called as systemic. It carries the oxygenated blood away from the heart to the body and to the all parts or to the all body organs. So let's deal with the blood cell. So blood cell is any cell found in the blood. So in mammals, these fall into three general categories. The red blood cells, also known as the erythrocytes, the white blood cells, also known as the leukocytes, and the platelets, also known as the thrombocytes. Together with these three kinds of blood cells sum up the 45% of the blood tissue. So the 55% of blood is called the plasma. Let's start with the red blood cell. So red blood cell, also known as the erythrocyte, are the most common type of blood cell and the principal means of delivering oxygen to the body tissue with the blood flow through the circulatory system. So they take up oxygen in the lungs or gills and release it while squeezing through the body's capillary. In humans, mature red blood cells are flexible biconcave discs that lack a nucleus and most organelle. So the red blood cell, as you can observe in the diagram, it lacks nucleus. That's why it is biconcave, or there's a hollow part within the middle. So the main function of the red blood cell is to harvest and pick up the oxygen in the lungs to be delivered into the body through the systemic circulation. Next is the white blood cells. So white blood cells are responsible in protection for our body since white blood cells can undergo the process of phagocytosis or the engulfing of microorganisms or pathogens within our body. So again, they provide protection against harmful pathogens or harmful microorganisms. Next is the platelet. The main function of platelet, they are responsible in blood clotting. So platelets are only about 20% of the diameter of red blood cells and the most numerous cell of the body. The principal function of red blood cell or the platelet is to prevent bleeding. So those are the three main types of blood cells: the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets, also known as the thrombocyte. So we're going to deal now with the highway or the transport medium within the circulatory system. And I am referring to the blood vessels. So the main blood vessels, we have the artery, vein, and the capillary. So when we say artery, the heart pumps blood out through the one main artery called the dorsal aorta. So artery, so it starts with letter A because it is where the blood travels away from the heart. So A, away, artery. So it then divides and branches out into many smaller arteries so that each region of our body has its own system and carries supplying with the fresh oxygen-rich blood. So the oxygenated blood passes through the artery throughout the body with the help of the systemic circulation. While the veins carries the deoxygenated blood back to the heart and will later be pumped to the lungs. So the veins receive blood from the capillaries after the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Therefore, the veins transport oxygen-poor blood back to the lungs and the heart. So the vein valves are necessary to keep blood flowing toward the heart, but they're also necessary to allow blood to flow against the force of gravity. So if the function of the artery is to allow the travel or to allow the blood to pass through the oxygenated blood to pass through our body, the veins is responsible as the passageway, or it acts as the passageway of the blood back to the heart and to the lung to pick up oxygen in the alveoli. So next is the capillary. Unlike arteries and veins, capillaries are very thin and fragile. So the capillaries are actually working one epithelial cell thick, and they're so thin that blood cells can only pass through them in a single file. So the main function of capillary is that it is the site where the gas exchange within our body occurs, since we all know that carbon dioxide is a product of respiration, and carbon dioxide will be secreted by the cell. So, for the blood to pick up that carbon dioxide from our body, so it occurs in the capillary, since we all know that carbon dioxide is poisonous. The exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place through the thin capillary wall. So again, the three main blood vessels are the artery, the capillary, and the vein. So we're going to deal now with the fluids within the circulatory system. So let's start with the blood. So blood is a specialized bodily fluid that delivers necessary substances to the body cells, such as nutrients and oxygen, and transports waste product from those same cells. And blood is circulated around the body through the blood vessels by pumping action of the heart. And take note that although blood is a fluid, blood is considered as a connective tissue with a liquid matrix. Next is the lymph. Lymph has a composition comparable to that of the blood plasma, but it may differ slightly in is that lymph contains white blood cells. So lymph picks up bacteria and brings them to lymph nodes to be destroyed. Metastatic cancer cells can also be transported via lymph. And also, lymph nodes are responsible in the production of antibodies. So antibodies acts against the antigens or the foreign materials that enters our body. And also, the lymph is the responsible for protection against the infection or invasion of microorganisms within our body, as lymph nodes releases the lymph that picks up bacteria and brings them to the lymph node to be destroyed. So we are now done with the circulatory system. So we're going to proceed now with the respiratory system, which is responsible in providing the oxygen which is needed for the body metabolism and other functions. So the respiratory system is made up of the conducting zone and the respiratory zone. So conducting zone is composed of the nose, the pharynx, the larynx, the vocal cords, and the trachea. While the respiratory zone is made of the bronchial tree, the lungs, and the alveoli. So nowadays, respiratory system is divided into conducting and respiratory because conducting were being absorbed or inhaled from the environment. While respiratory zone is the area of the respiratory system where the gas exchange occurs. So what are the functions of respiratory system? Number one, it allows gas exchange to take place in order to remove carbon dioxide from the blood. Next, it supplies the blood with oxygen in order for the blood to deliver oxygen to all parts of the body. And of course, it enables us to talk or vocalize. So let's start with the conducting zone. So the conducting zone includes the structures that conduct air from the atmosphere to the respiratory zone. They also function in warming and humidification, filtration, and cleaning of the inspired air. So filtration that occurs in the nostril, since the hair present in the nostrils called the cilia is responsible in filtering out microorganisms or dust. So the respiratory system conducting zone starts, of course, with the nose, followed by the pharynx, and then we have the epiglottis. So again, epiglottis are the leaf-like structure that covers the trachea and the esophagus. So when we are eating, the epiglottis will cover the trachea, but when we are inhaling, the epiglottis will cover the esophagus to avoid air to pass through the esophagus and avoid food to pass through the trachea, followed by the larynx, vocal cords, and the windpipe. Let's start with the nose. So before air enters the body, the nose filters it to remove dirt and warms it up so that it has the appropriate temperature. Your sense of smell is also in the nose. So our olfactory nerve, which is connected in our nose, which is attached to our brain, are responsible for our sense of smell. Next is the pharynx. So the pharynx, also known as the throat, is a muscular tube that carries the air down into the windpipe and also carries food into the gullet. While the epiglottis, again, is a leaf-shaped piece of cartilage that covers the top of the voice box during swallowing. It keeps the food out of the lungs and out of the voice box. So that is the main function of epiglottis. Next is the larynx. So the larynx is also known as the voice box. So the voice box sits on the top of the windpipe. So it has a backbone of cartilage that you can feel at the front of your throat. This is also known as the Adam's apple. And it is more prominent in men than women. Vocal cords are at the center of the voice box and make sounds when you talk, sing, cough, or hum. They are folds of membrane lining that vibrate when air flows through them to the lungs. So a man's larynx is usually larger than a woman's, making his voice lower and the Adam's apple more prominent. Next is the windpipe, also known as the trachea. So the trachea or windpipe takes air from the vocal cords into the lungs. So it has the ribs of the cage or to keep it open. So those are the organ or the component of the conducting zone. So we're going to proceed now with the respiratory zone or where the gas exchange occurs. So respiratory zone is the site of oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange with the blood. So the respiratory bronchioles and the alveolar ducts are responsible for the 10% of the gas exchange. The alveoli are responsible for the other 90%. So the respiratory zone after the windpipe starts with the bronchial tree, followed by the lungs and the alveoli. Let's start with the bronchial tree. So the bronchi are airways that the air to the bottom of the lungs. So the airways are called as bronchial tree because they look like the roots of a large tree. So the bronchial tree attach the lungs to the trachea. It allows the air or the or the inspired air to pass through the lungs and allows the gas exchange. Next is the lungs. So lungs is composed of tiny sacs called the alveoli, extend from the end of the smallest airways or the bronchioles. They look a bit like a bunches of grapes hanging off a stem. And the left and the right lungs are about the same size, except that the left lung has an indentation at the bottom to allow room for the heart. So how oxygen gets into the bloodstream? So oxygen enters your bloodstream through a process called respiration. So the walls of the alveoli are thin, allowing oxygen from the inhaled air to pass through where it bypassing the red blood cells. This, what we call the oxygenated blood, will travel throughout the body, providing vital fuel on the living cells. After delivering its oxygen, the deoxygenated blood returns to the lungs and carbon dioxide passes through the thin walls of the alveoli and leaves the lungs when we exhale. So the important process of inhaling and exhaling gases is called as breathing. So breathing is the process that moves air in and out of the lungs. Organisms require oxygen to release energy via respiration in the form of metabolism of energy-rich molecules such as glucose. So that metabolism of energy-rich molecules is also called as the catabolism. So breathing is only one process that delivers oxygen to where it is needed in the body and removes the carbon dioxide. So the diaphragm is a sheet of internal muscle that extends across the bottom of the rib cage. It separates the thoracic cavity or the heart, lungs, and the ribs from the abdominal cavity, which includes the stomach, the intestine, and the other intestinal organs. And also, it performs important function in the respiration. So how we breathe. So breathing is also called as inspiration, and breathing out is also called as expiration. So your chest muscles and diaphragm help you to breathe in by expanding your chest. So this increases the pressure so that air rushes down to the bottom of the lungs. Breathing out is easy because your muscles relax and the air is squeezed out. So inspiration or inhalation is the movement of the air from the external environment through the airways and into the alveoli. While expiration or exhalation is the movement of air out of the bronchial tubes through the airways to the external environment during respiration. So we are now done with the respiratory system, which includes the gas exchange, the, the conducting, and the respiratory zone. So we're now going to deal with the nervous system. Key component of nervous system, so it is divided into two, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system is of course made up of the brain and the spinal cord, while the peripheral nervous system is made up of the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. So what are the functions of nervous system? Number one, it receives information from the sense organ. Number two, it processes the information in the brain and the spinal cord. It responds to the information and it stores long-term and short-term memory. So what are the relationships of the parts of the nervous system? So we have the receptor. So receptor are the nerves that detects the stimulus. So as the receptor detects a certain stimuli, it will send electric impulses to the processing center, also called as the brain, together with the spinal cord. And then, with the help of the sensory nerves. As the spinal cord releases the effector. So with the help of motor nerves, effectors will now respond to the stimulus. So the effector and the receptor are the nerves which are members or part of the peripheral nervous system, where the central nervous system includes the central processing unit, which is the brain and the spinal cord. So let's start with the neuron. Neuron is also known as the nerve cell. It is an electrically excited cell that processes and transmits information by electrical and chemical signaling. Neurons connect to each other to form networks, and they are core components of the nervous system as it includes brain, spinal cord, and the peripheral ganglia. So there are three specialized types of neurons. We have the sensory neurons, the motor neurons, and the interneurons. When we say sensory neurons, it responds to the touch, sound, light, and numerous stimuli, affecting cells of the sensory organs that send signals to the spinal cord and to the brain. While motor neurons receive signals from the brain and the spinal cord, cause muscle contractions, and affect our glands. While the interneurons connect neurons to other neurons within the same region of the brain and the spinal cord. So again, receptor detects the stimulus and the effector responds to the stimulus. So let's start with the structure of the neuron. So a typical neuron possesses a cell body, dendrites, and an axon. So when you say dendrites, these are the filaments that arise from the cell body and often extending for hundreds of microfilaments and branching multiple times, giving rise to complex dendritic tree. While axon is a specialized cellular filament that arises from the cell body and travels for a distance as far as 1 meter in humans and even more in other species. So, Again, the nervous system is divided into two parts. We have the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So let's start with the central nervous system. Central nervous system is the processing center of the nerve network of the body. So it is called as the central processing center. It is because it contains or it has the brain and the spinal cord. And we all know that brain is the control center of our body. It is where the body interprets information and it has received from the outside, it analyzes the meaning and decides what to do to maintain the stability. It is made up of the brain, protected by the spinal cord, protected by the vertebral column. So now we're going to deal with the structure of the brain. So the human brain is the center of the human nervous system. It monitors and regulates the body actions and reactions. So it is divided into four lobes: the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. So let's start with the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe are located behind the forehead and do much of the work of complex thinking like planning, imagining, and reasoning, and also uh, in making decisions. Those are the function of frontal lobe. Next to it is the parietal lobe. The parietal lobe are located behind the frontal lobe. They contain the sensory cortex, which processes messages such as those related to the touch, taste, and temperature, and the motor cortex, which controls our movement. So if frontal lobe is responsible for the thinking processes, parietal is responsible for the sensory processes. How about occipital lobe? So occipital lobe are the rear part of the brain. They contain visual cortex, which processes sight. So if frontal lobe is for the thinking, parietal lobe is for the sensory, occipital lobe is for the visual cortex. While the temporal lobe are the lobe found near the ears. That's why they are responsible for the hearing and memory retrieval. So again, frontal lobe are for the thinking processes. Parietal lobe is for the sensory processes. Occipital lobe is for the visual cortex, and temporal lobe is uh, for the hearing and memory retrieval. And we have the cerebellum. So cerebellum is the part of the brain which is responsible in coordination, fine movement, and balance. So human brain continuously receives sensory information and rapidly analyzes this data and then responds, controlling bodily actions and functions. So the cerebrum as the largest part of the brain, take note of that. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. It has two hemispheres. The cerebrum controls the voluntary movement, speech, intelligence, memory, emotion, and sensory processing. So we're going to proceed now with the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus regulates the functions like thirst, appetite, and sleep patterns. So it also regulates the release of hormones from the pituitary gland. And take note that pituitary gland is the master gland of the body. Next is the midbrain. Midbrain acts like a complex switchboard which allows the brain to communicate with the rest of the nervous system. So the midbrain serves as the communication sublayer or the communication center of our brain. Pons. So the pons relays messages from the cerebrum to the cerebellum and the spinal cord. So again, the function of pons is to relay messages or to serves as the intercommunication between the cerebrum and the cerebellum. We also have medulla oblongata. So this portion of the brainstem is located just above the spinal cord, and it regulates vital functions such as heartbeat and breathing. Spinal cord, of course, this portion of the central nervous system runs down from the inside of the spinal column, connecting the brain with the nerves going to the rest of the body. The cerebrum or the cerebellum helps coordinate and fine-tune movement and balance. So I have here a diagram of the type or of the top view of the brain. So the human brain, the adult human brain weighs an average weight of about 1.5 kilograms or 3 pounds. It is very soft, having a consistency similar to soft gelatin or firm tofu. So the frontal lobes or the frontal lobes are located behind the forehead and do much work again for the thinking processes. So parietal lobe again is for the sensory and motor cortex. Occipital lobe is for the vision, while temporal lobe is for the hearing processes. So now we're going to deal with the spinal cord. So spinal cord is a long thin tubular bundle of a nervous tissue and support cells that extends from the brain. So the spinal cord has three major functions. Serves as the highway for sensory information which travels up the spinal cord and serves as a highway for motor information which travels down the spinal cord. Again, the spinal cord serves as sensory information highway and motor information highway. And of course, it serves as a center for coordinating certain reflexes. So the peripheral nervous system, the PNS is a part of the nervous system that connects the central nervous system to the different organs and glands of the body. So it is made up of cranial nerves, spinal nerves, and the somatic muscle, together with the autonomic muscle. So cranial nerves consist of 12 pairs of nerves from the brain. Spinal nerves consist of 31 pairs of nerves from the spinal cord. So the peripheral nervous system has two main divisions. The somatic system that connects the central nervous system to the voluntary muscles, while the autonomic system that connects central nervous system to the involuntary muscle. So the diagram in the slide shows the peripheral nerves that is attached to the brain. So as you can observe, those peripheral nerves has their own function. So some are attached for sense, some are attached for motion, for taste, for the olfactories, and so on and so forth. Now we're going to deal with the organ responsible in perspiration and the urination. And this system is called as the excretory system. So excretory system, it includes the kidney, the liver, the sweat glands, the lungs, the large intestine, and the main functions are, number one, it expels the metabolic waste from the body. It maintains internal balance. So that internal balance, also called as homeostasis, was performed with the help of metabolism. So when we say metabolism, it is the set of chemical reactions that happen in the living organism to maintain life, and these processes allow organisms to grow and reproduce, maintain structures, and respond to their environment. Metabolism is usually divided into two categories. We have the catabolism and the anabolism. Catabolism breaks down organic matter, for example, harvest energy in a cellular respiration. Anabolism is used, of course, to store energy. So if cellular respiration is an example of catabolism, anabolism, the examples for that is the photosynthesis. Next is the kidney. Kidney are the principal excretory system organs of the body. They excrete most of the urea, sugar, and salts in form of urine. So the human kidney are in two bean-shaped organs, one each side of the backbone and about the size of a fist. And small as it is, the kidney contains over 1 million excretory units or filtering units called as the nephrons. So again, the filtering unit of kidney is the nephrons. Next is the liver. Liver acts on excess amino acids in the blood, which are end products of protein digestion. The removal of amino acids happens here as the liver converts them into urea, and urea is transported by the blood from the liver mostly into the kidneys, which filter it out and the blood expel it as a part of urine. Next is the sweat glands. So sweat glands during exercise, heavy work, the body can lose plenty of water and salt. So I have here a table which compares the composition of bodily fluids, the urine and the sweat. In terms of water, urine is 95% water, while sweat is 99% water. While in salt, urine is 5% salt, while sweat is 1% salt. Next is the lungs. So lungs is as blood passes through the capillaries of the lungs, it receives a fresh supply of oxygen. So at the same time, it expels excess carbon monoxide and a small amount of water into the air of the lungs. So the undigested part of the food passes through into the large intestine. And the walls of the large intestine absorbs most of the liquid portion of the waste. So as what I've said earlier, the main function of the large intestine is for the water absorption, leaving a more or less solid feces that the body expels through the anus. The cell lining of the large intestine excretes excess salt that is thrown out together with the feces. So let's proceed now to the system that controls our emotion, our growth and development, and other changes. And that system is called as the endocrine system. So endocrine system is composed of, it has two components, the endocrine glands and the hormones. Endocrine glands are the glands that secrete their product through the walls of the blood vessels directly into the blood, while hormones are chemicals produced by the body which together with the nervous system control and regulate the functions of the body. What are the functions of endocrine system? Number one, it control and regulates the temperature. And the next one is it maintains homeostasis of the body. When we say homeostasis, it refers to the state of internal equilibrium. So, in a healthy body, homeostasis is possible because the body has efficient control mechanism that opposes changes in its internal environment. And when we say homeostasis, meaning you have to control your body temperature, amount of water in the body, the amount of metabolic waste, body calcium level, and of course, the amount of hormones in our blood. So the major endocrine glands. So the body receives information from the environment through the organ. So that information serves as the stimuli. And the information is related by the nerves to the central nervous system where it is processed. And then later on, the brain will now send messages to the nerves and to the body organs, especially the endocrine glands, to release this what we call hormones to provide solution or to maintain homeostasis for the specific problem. So I have here a chart of the major glands and their secreted hormones as well as their functions. So number one is the pineal gland. So the pineal gland secreted this what we call the hormone what we call melatonin. It is involved in activities such as the seasonal rhythm or the circadian rhythm. Next is the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus uh, it secretes hormones released by posterior pituitary and the anterior pituitary. So the pituitary gland or the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland releases this what we call oxytocin. So oxytocin, it controls contraction of smooth muscles of the uterus and the mammary gland cells. While oxytocin is important in giving birth. Next is the vasopressin or the antidiuretic hormone or ADH. It promotes retention of water by the kidneys. So if we promote retention of water in the kidney, then you are preventing urination. Next is the hormones secreted by the anterior lobe. So the hormones secreted by the anterior lobe, we have the growth hormone or the somatotropin. So it stimulates growth, especially of the skeleton, and regulates metabolism. Next is the anterior lobe. Anterior lobe, it releases the thyroid stimulating hormone and the adrenocorticotropic hormone. So the TSH or the thyroid stimulating hormone regulates the activity of the thyroid gland, while the adrenocorticotropic hormone stimulates the adrenal cortex to secrete glucocorticoids. Another major gland or another secretion of the anterior lobe, we have the prolactin. So prolactin stimulates the mammary glands to produce milk. So lac means milk. So follicle stimulating hormone of the FSH regulates the follicle formation in ovary and sperm formation in the testes. Next is the luteinizing hormone. So luteinizing hormone is responsible in stimulating ovaries and the testes to release their reproductive cells. Next is the middle lobe. So middle lobe releases the melanocyte stimulating hormone or the MSH. It increases production of the skin pigment called as the melanin. Next is the thyroid. So the thyroid or it releases the thyroxine or T4 and the triiodothyronine. So the main function of thyroxine is for the metabolism, while the calcitonin, which is also released by the thyroid, is responsible in lowering blood calcium level. Next, we have the parathyroid. So parathyroid hormone or parat hormone is responsible in raising blood calcium level. So that is the opposite of calcitonin. If calcitonin lowers the blood calcium level, parathyroid hormone raises the blood calcium level. Next is the thymus. So the thymus gland or the thymus is an organ in our chest. So the thymus stimulates or secretes the thymosin, which stimulates the T cells or the memory T cells, which are antibodies and responsible in protecting us against these antigens or foreign pathogens or microorganisms. Next is the adrenal gland. So adrenal gland is composed of two parts, the adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla. So the adrenal cortex releases the glucocorticoids, which increases the blood glucose, while and also it secretes the mineral corticoids. So mineral corticoids promote the reabsorption of sodium and excretion of potassium, and also small amounts of androgen. We also have this adrenal medulla. So adrenal medulla secretes the epinephrine, also known as the adrenaline or the emergency hormone, and the non-norepinephrine or the non-adrenaline. So these hormones are responsible for the fight or flight response. So when we are in emergency, when we are at risk, the adrenal medulla releases adrenaline, which is responsible for the sudden increase of our or sudden increase of blood pressure. Next is the pancreas. So the pancreas secretes insulin. So insulin is responsible in lowering blood glucose level. The pancreas also secretes glucagon. So the glucagon controls the transformation of liver glycogen into blood glucose, thus raising blood glucose level. And next is the somatostatin. It inhibits secretion of blood of both insulin and glucagon. How about the testes? Testes and ovaries are also part of the endocrine system. So testes secretes androgen, testosterone, dihydrotestosterone, and androstenedione. So these hormones control sperm formation in the process of spermatogenesis, and as well as the development of and maintenance of the male secondary characteristics, while the ovary secreted estrogen, 6-estradiol, estrone, and the estriol. It stimulates growth of uterine lining and control development and maintenance of female secondary sex characteristic, together with the progesterone, which stimulates growth of the uterine lining for the pregnant, uh, for the pregnant uh, for the pregnant or lactating mothers. Next is the stomach and the upper intestine. So stomach and upper intestine are also considered as part of the endocrine system. Why? Because they secrete hormones such as the gastrin and the secretin. Gastrin stimulates secretion of the gastric juices in the by the gastric glands, while the secretin stimulates secretion of pancreatic juices by the pancreatic glands. So now, we are done with the endocrine system, with the major glands, together with the hormones and their function. We're now going to deal with the reproductive system. And take note that we are going to discuss reproductive system for educational purposes. So I have here diagram, pictures of the external and internal features of the female and male reproductive system. So again, it's only for educational purposes. So reproductive system is of course divided into two. We have the male reproductive system and the female reproductive system. Let's start with the male reproductive system. So the component of the male reproductive system, we have the external features. We have the penis, scrotum, and the testicles. While the internal structures, we have the epididymis, vas deferens, prostate gland, urethra, and the gall and the bladder. So what are the functions of the male reproductive system? Number one, it produces, maintain, transport sperm cell or male gametes and it protect fluids called semen. And it discharges sperm within the female reproductive tract and to produce secrete male sex hormones. So I have here a diagram, external diagram or a cross section of human reproductive organ showing the internal organs and some external organs. So the external structures, we have the penis, scrotum, testicle, and the three external structures. So let's see the penis. So penis is made up of two parts, the main part and the glands or the tip and sometimes the head. So the penis delivers sperm through the urethra into the female reproductive tract. So the penis is also known as the male copulatory organ as because it is the organ that transfers sperm cell together with the semen in the female reproductive organ. We also have the scrotum. The scrotum, also called as the scrotal sac, contains the testicles and epididymis and hangs under the penis. We have the testicles. So testicles, these are two testicles or testes, produces sperm and made sex hormones called testosterone. So let's proceed now with the internal structure. We have epididymis, vas deferens, prostate gland, seminal vesicle, and the gallbladder and the urethra. So epididymis, next to each testicle, the epididymis is a tightly coiled tube where sperm are stored. From here, sperm are transported to the vas deferens. So again, the area where the sperm is stored is the epididymis, not epidermis. Again, epididymis is the site where the sperm is being stored. Next is the vas deferens. So vas deferens, also known as the ductus deferens, is a thin muscular tube that transports sperm from the epidermis to the urethra. So again, the vas deferens is to transport sperm from the epididymis to the urethra. Next is the prostate gland. The prostate gland or walnut-shaped gland surrounds a portion of the urethra and produces some of the fluids in the semen. We also have the seminal vesicle located at the top of the bladder. The two seminal vesicles secrete thick fluid that nourishes the sperm. So, as the sperm was produced with the testes and the testicles, it was be stored in the epididymis. And the prostate gland, together with the seminal vesicle, they will produce the semen that will serve as the medium and food of the sperm. Next is the bladder. So the bladder is a muscular sac that stores urine and it is released through the urethra. And urethra is the tube that carries semen and urine out to the penis outside the environment or to the female reproductive organ. So we are now done with the internal and external features of the male reproductive organ. So we're going to proceed now with the female reproductive organ. So the component of the female reproductive organ, we have the external structures and the internal structures. External structures, we have the labia minor, labia major, vagina, clitoris, and the urethra. For the external structures, we have the vagina, the cervix, the uterus, fallopian tubes, and the ovaries. So what are the functions of the female reproductive system? So the function is to maintain and transport egg cell or the female gametes to the site of fertilization. It nourishes the fetus and should fertilization takes place. And also it produces female sex cells and hormones that maintains the reproductive cell. Now, I have here an external diagram of the female reproductive organ. So again, it is for educational purposes only. So for the external structures, we have the labia majora, labia minora. Okay, so the main difference of the two. Labia majora are the two outer flaps of tissue that surrounds the labia minora and the vagina. While the labia minora are the two inner flaps of tissue just inside the labia majora surrounds the opening of the vagina, while the vagina is the tube-like structure that connects the uterus to the outside of the body, and the birth of the baby allows its span. We also have the clitoris. So clitoris is a small sensory organ located just above the vagina, and the urethra is a tube-like structure that carries urine out of the body. So the female reproductive internal structure. So vagina is a tube-like organ that connects uterus to the outside of the body, and the birth of the baby follows its path. We have the cervix. So cervix is a lower portion of the uterus that opens into the vagina, and during the labor, the cervix dilates or expands and about 4 inches in diameter. While the uterus, also called as the womb, the uterus is a hollow pear-shaped organ with a muscular wall and a lining. The uterus expands many times in size during pregnancy to hold the growing fetus. We also have the fallopian tubes. So these thin soft tubes extend from the uterus to the ovaries. During ovulation, an ovary releases an egg into the fallopian tube next to it. And of course, we have the ovary. Ovary are located in the left and right lower abdomen, and ovaries produces egg as well as hormone like estrogen and progesterone. So to summarize our module entitled uh, Human Anatomy and Physiology, I have a table comparing the components and functions of all the 10 human body systems. So for the integumentary system, it is composed of the skin, hair, and nails. The function is to protect internal organs. The skeletal system, it is composed of axial and skeleton, and the function is to protect the internal organ and other movement. Muscular system is consists of cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. Excuse me. Cardiac, smooth, and skeletal muscles. The function is for movement. Digestive system, it is consists of gastrointestinal tract and the accessory organ. And the function is to break down food into particles and absorbable by the cells. Circulatory system is composed of the heart, blood cells, blood vessels, and the fluid. And it passes nutrients, gases, hormones, blood cells, and others to and form the cells. Respiratory system is composed of conducting zone and the respiratory zone. It allows gas exchange to take place in order to remove carbon dioxide from the blood. Central nervous system is composed of the nervous system, sorry, is composed of the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system. So the main function of nervous system is to receive information, processes information, respond to the information. The excretory system, the kidney, liver, sweat, glands, lungs, and large intestine are members of the excretory system. The function of excretory system is to expel metabolic waste from the body, maintain internal balance. For the endocrine system, it is composed of endocrine glands and the hormone. The function of endocrine system is to control and regulate body processes. And of course, lastly, the reproductive system, it is composed of internal and external structures of male and female reproductive system. The main function is for production of human sex cells, release of hormones, and of course, for the perpetuation of life. For our trivia, did you know that the largest organ of the body is the skin? Okay, so it may be contrary to our previous discussion since I mentioned that liver is also the largest organ. But take note that skin is the largest organ of the body. although internal and externally. But liver is the largest internal organ of the body. Take note of that. Liver is the largest internal organ of the body, but skin is the largest organ of the body. To check whether you learn something in our module, let's have our brain shaker. Direction: you have to identify the words being described or defined in each item. So you can answer orally or you can write it down. And take note that since we have 10 human body systems, uh, I need one question in every system. So let's start with the integumentary system. Question number 1. It is the layer of the skin that provides waterproofing and serves as a barrier of infection. So what is this layer of the skin? Very good. The correct answer is epidermis. Epidermis is the layer of the skin that provides water, proofing, and barrier against infection. How about this one? So this question was derived from the skeletal system. It is the membrane that lines the outer surface of all bones, except at the bones of the long bones. I am referring to the skin membrane, outer covering of bones. Correct. Answer is periosteum. That is the membrane that lines the outer surface of the bone. Next, this question is derived from the lesson about muscular system. It is a type of muscle which is attached to the bones and responsible of the movement. So it is it is also one of the type of the muscles. So it works together with the muscle for the locomotion. And the correct answer is skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle is the muscle attached to the bone and responsible for the movement. Next, this question is derived from the digestive system. It is a soft muscular tube that moves the food from the pharynx to the stomach. And the correct answer is esophagus. Very good. So again, esophagus is a soft muscular tube that moves food from the pharynx to the stomach. Next, it is a type of blood cells responsible in defending our body against infection and foreign bodies. So this question was derived in our lesson about circulatory system. So the correct answer is white blood cells or leukocytes. Very good. So their function is to defend our body against infection and bodies. Next. So this question was derived from the respiratory system. So the question is, it is the lip-shaped piece of cartilage that covers the top of larynx when swallowing. What do you call to this cartilage? And the correct answer is epiglottis. Very good. Epiglottis is the lip-shaped piece of cartilage that covers the top of larynx when swallowing. Next. So this question was derived from our lesson about nervous system. It is an electrically excitable cell that processes and transmits information by electrical and chemical signaling. I am referring to the simplest unit of brain cells, also called as nerve cells. So what is this term? And the correct answer is neuron. Very good. Neuron is the basic unit of brain cells or the nerve cells. Next, it is the smallest filtering unit of kidney. The smallest filtering unit of kidney. And it is very obvious it is derived from the excretory system. Correct. The answer is nephrons. How about this one? It is a hormone that controls contraction of smooth muscles of the uterus and the mammary gland cells. I mentioned earlier that it's important for lactating and giving birth. It is derived from our lesson in endocrine system. Correct. The answer is oxytocin. Very good. How about this one? It is a tube-like structure that carries urine out of the body. The tube-like structure that carries urine out of the body. So for female, it carries urine, but for the male, it also carries the semen. And the correct answer is urethra. Very good. Congratulations, you are now done with module number 9 entitled Human Anatomy and Physiology. If you have any questions, suggestion, or clarification, you're free to send us an email or inquiry in our online website. There are also downloadable materials, activities, and examination. Then again, I am your junior mentor, Teacher Dave. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Thank you.